Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm curious about
Building open, authentic, loving relationship.
I'm curious about jealousy.
I'm curious about polyamory.
Does it just mean that you're fucking all the time?
How can I tell my parents that my partner is already married?
I'm curious about
How do you know when you're too busy to have another relationship?
I'm curious about dominant and subordinate relationships.
I'm curious about sexual health.
How can relationships evolve with people as they grow and change?
Welcome to the Curious Folks podcast for those challenging the status quo in love, sex, and relationships. My name is Effy Blue.
And I'm Jacqueline Misla. And today we're challenging the idea that relationship math is as simple as an equal division of labor across those in it. In all likelihood, at any given moment, one person probably believes that they are putting in more than the other. And so what happens when you feel like you are doing more than your partners, more housework, more emotional labor, more effort towards sexual intimacy, more effort towards time and connection, etc.? Or what happens if your partner feels that they are doing more than you are?
Yeah.
So I brought this topic to the table because this has been an ongoing
Yeah,
this has been an ongoing thing, not only in our conversations, in my entire life. This theme of feeling like I am doing more, people being annoyed at my idea that I am doing more, and me partnering with folks where there feels like a natural imbalance, if you will, where it feels like the relationship is designed, right, exactly, for me to do more. And it has taken, all of my 40 years to get to a point where I'm actually now rethinking and challenging the relationship math that I had in my head. So the relationship math in my head went a little something like this. Let's assume there's 100% of things to do within a relationship, right? I've realized over time that I have high expectations based on everyone who's ever interacted with me ever. I have high expectations for high quality of life, high quality of what can happen. I have very strong executive functioning skills. And so if I map out a vision, I'm like, we are going to get there by hell or high water. We're going to get there. I have the discipline. I have the list. I have the time management skills to get us there.
That's exactly why we are heading towards our 100th episode of this podcast. It is 100% of the reason why we are getting to our 100th episode of this podcast. So yes.
Like, pandemic or not, Effy's moving across the country. It's okay. Time zones be damned. We're gonna get there.
We'll get there. So yes, carry on, Jacqueline.
Oh, I will. I will carry on until I get there. So the idea, right? So the idea is that there's all these things that need to be done to make a life and relationship work and thrive. I am committed to a life and a relationship that is thriving. And so if there's 100% of the things, I at some point came to terms with, I am going to put in 70%. And my partner will put in 30. Like, that is just what is going to happen. I always put in more. I always do more things. And I came to terms with that and was fine with it. It was like, okay, I'm going to be the one who remembers all the things, who keeps track of all the stuff, who orders the groceries, and who reminds us of special days, and who keeps I'm going to be the holder of the emotional labor and the physical household, all of the things. And you're going to do your 30%. But then what would happen is, when it felt like for me, they weren't even doing their 30%. I went from generosity of spirit to just deeply resentful and angry and just flipped a switch, right? So a good example, and we'll talk about this, that the parent-child relationship dynamic is different than a partnership relationship dynamic, but this is the one that comes to mind to me. In the morning, with my daughter, I get her up, wake her up in a lovely way, make sure that she has breakfast, remind her, go take a shower, put the shower on for her, do all the things to try to set up her life so that she can do all the things she wants, but with ease. But when she then, after all of that giving and all of that generosity and mommy loveliness, can't physically get out of bed when she is supposed to, or like takes way longer than she should, kind of playing with her breakfast or whatever, I become furious, right? Or I'm working on that. But I would get furious because I was like, you can't even do your 30%. All I need you to do is physically get out of the bed and put your clothes on. Like, that is all that I'm asking. And you can't even do that. Now, and I now translate that to partnership conversations that have happened over the course of my, adult relationships, where I'm like, I picked out the restaurant, I did this, I did that. All I needed you to do was be here on time. That's all that I needed of you. And you can't even do that. Right? So that relationship math existed for me for a long time. And it is only until probably this last year that I have revisited all of that and actually tried to deconstruct it all. And I think that is what we're going to explore today.
There is so much there, Jacqueline. There's so much there. And I think, and the good thing about it, I think it's you, by no means you're alone. You know that. I think,
Yes.
I have my version of this, and we'll definitely delve into that as well. And I think this will just resonate with everybody that's listening, because I think we have at least once in our lives been on either side of that, right? Somebody saying to us, like, I did all this, and then you just had to do this one thing, or the person that's saying, I've done all this, and all you had to do is this, right? I think it's a topic and a space that will resonate with a lot of people. Your relationship with your daughter is all of our kids, right? Our relationship with our children, our offspring, is different to our relationship with our partners. And I think it's really important to have that distinction, because sometimes we do find ourselves in that dynamic in adult relationships. And when we do, it's very hard to then have a place for the erotic when there's a parental dynamic, because that's just not where those things live in our brain. So I think just keep reminding that those are two separate relationships. And
can we stay there for a second? Just because I do think that that's important, particularly for those who were socialized as female and all of the dynamics that go along with that, that if you are in a partnership that has children and you have taken on or been socialized around the responsibility of doing all the things and have created that dynamic of, to your point, the parent-child relationship is designed to be disproportionate, right? We are supposed to, as adults, do more for our children as they grow into being adults. But that can then translate that energy into your adult to adult relationships and then correct. And now we can't be erotic if I am treating you like my child. Correct.
Exactly.
If I feel like your child, right? Either I'm treating you like your child or I feel like your child. Sexy time is off the table.
Right. Exactly. So it's worth it. So I think that's worth mentioning. And the other piece I want to talk about, just to address, is this idea of the 70-30 assumes a very specific style of straight up maths, right? I just don't think that's how relationship math works. I think in your formula of I do 70%, they do 30%, I think the operative word is do. And I think when you were even describing it, you said, let's say there's 100% of the things that need to be done in a relationship, which I think is its own criteria, things that need to be done within a relationship. And then there's the relationship itself, the 100% of the relationship, not just the things to do in the relationship, right? There's a distinction in there. One sits inside, if you think about Venn diagrams, one will sit inside the other one. So the relationship itself, 100%. And then within that, there is things to be done within the relationship, its own 100%. You know, now we're getting into some complicated math.
So I'm wondering if we can, I want to do a deep dive for a few minutes into, if you're the person, if you're listening and you're like, I'm the one who always does all the things, right? I'm the one who holds, again, the emotional burden, the household work, the time and connection, the remembering of the things. If you're that person, we're going to talk to you for a little bit. But other person and people, stay on and listen, be a fly on the wall to this conversation. We're going to switch it up in a second, but I think it's important for folks to hear both sides. For the person who feels like they're holding all the things, and let me tell you what that looks like for me. I'm going to give you a little preview into my brain. my brain, it's like there is like a ticker going on constantly. So, if you ever watch like a cable news show and at the bottom, there's like the running list of like all of the news. So you have the news that you're hearing, and then you have this running list at the bottom. Or it's like if you had like talk radio on in the background where there's always noise. That is what it is like to live inside of my brain. There's what's happening in the moment, and there is a constant running tab of all the things that need to get done, haven't gotten done, should have been done, like all of it at all times, right? And because that runs my brain, it is the way in which I have shown up in the world and have to like fight against that, where I'm like, and now this, and now this, and now this, and now this. And it keeps score because it does an exquisite job of capturing everything. Everything I've done, everything you've done, everything I haven't done, everything you haven't done. It holds it all. And so if you're the person who feels that way, and if you're listening in and you're like, oh, I do not feel that way, know that might be happening in your partner's mind.
Someone might be doing it for you.
Right, exactly.
Someone might be keeping on track of everything for you.
Exactly. And so that looked really different across my multiple relationships, so with some of my partnerships that have meant the doing of the house stuff, like remembering we got to send out this bill, we got to do this thing, we got to get the groceries. For other partnerships, it could have been around more of the emotional labor of it. We haven't gone on a date in a while. We haven't connected, and being the one to lead that work. But for most of my adult relationships, at some point, I felt like I'm the one who has to hold the weight of this thing.
Sure. First of all, that sounds exhausting. So I'm sorry for that is what it's like for you. I get it. My experience of it is very different than yours. I don't have a running ticker. I have like a cloud. So my brain chatter is not a ticker. It's more like a complicated mind map and word cloud that just like hovers and shifts and moves. It has no order and it has no obvious connection to one another, but at some point it all connects, and then I have these like epiphanies.
Well, can you give me an example of that? So it's like, is it like I have to do the dishes? Oh, speaking of dishes, I forgot that mug cracked. I got to get another mug. Oh, wait, Christmas is coming. I got to get gifts. Is that what give me an example to your world?
Sure. It's like a problem solving mind, but it'll work very differently. So for example, I'll start with the dishes. Like I'll give you an example. I'll start with the dishes and I'll be doing dishes and I'll be like looking at the dish soap and I'll think, oh, what is dish soap made of? Oh, I don't know. But its function is to break down fat and protein because that's what the dishes are. And at that point I'll go, oh God, I have that stain that I'm trying to get off my, coat. And that was like oil. Okay, so if this is happening with the fat and it's going to work with that. So I'll then like I'll take the dish soap, I'll go and like, handle my laundry and I'll come back. And then at that point, like I probably left the tap on and I come back and I'm like, oh, the tap. So that's kind of what happens for me. But the interesting is like, just a bunch of information is floating around. And I think what happens is when I try to focus on something, it starts to connect a bunch of other things. So when I'm focusing, I see dish soap, I'm like, dish soap, what is it made of? Oh, I know, like I have a piece of information that's going to get me that answer. It goes there. And once it goes there, it like goes, oh, but this information also useful for here, here, and here. Right?
I'm picturing, in the movies where like it's about like a mathematician or some scientist and they're just staring at this like big wall of numbers and stuff. And it starts to like illuminate like different pieces from the board and it comes together and they solve the problem. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and it's like a million ideas like coming together at the same time. And then when I consume information, it's just like it just hovers around. I don't have a working memory, as you know.
So let me ask you a question, because you also have felt like you have done more in some of your adult relationships.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for you? For me, it feels like holding all of the pieces and making sure they get executed. What does that look like for you?
Yes, not doing, though the manifest is doing, and I don't think about it as doing. It's more like I feel like I take on the strength of the connection more than the other person. And that is a combination of being, doing, knowing, I think it's like more of a bit like my brain. It's like all the things at the same time that connect in a weird kind of way, right?
Yeah.
I've noticed this across multiple relationships, like the trend across multiple relationships that I was like, as long as I invested in the relationship was going really well, and as long as I was like fully connected, my very last relationship, I feel like I was doing a lot of the work to have the connection available. So things that common shared interests and like places that we would go to, and like really engineered and designed the relationship, but without really a common shared goal. I was like, I know what's right for me and I know what's right for this other person, and I'm just going to go forth and like create this world, and I'm going to take interest in the things that they're interested in. So we have like a rich conversation, and I'm going to calibrate to their sexual expression, and I'm going to almost like hotwire intimacy because I, learn and understand how the other person's feeling. So it's not like doing the things that life requires because I can't do those things for myself, never mind for somebody else, but more like things that really make the connection, if you will.
Right. You extended your bridge further, it sounds like.
Yes, that's a beautiful way to put it.
To meet them where they are at. And in both our cases, we both were designed and held the world that we were living in with these people. You created the world, and it sounds like you created a world that was more skewed towards their wants, needs. Exactly. I created a world, frankly, that's probably more skewed towards my wants and needs. And which is why I had to manage more of the work of it. Because I was like, if we're going to do things, we're going to do them my way. And if we're going to do them my way, who's the best person to do them but me?
Yes.
So all you need to do is just get up, get dressed, and get on the train. Like I'm gonna take you to where you need to go. And then if you can't get dressed and get on that damn train, now I'm pissed because I'm doing all the other work. But it was towards my own vision. And it sounds like for you created the connection again, but it was really meeting them where they were at.
Yeah. I think the extending the bridge further is a great analogy. I think that's kind of what my trend has been. And of course, I did a digging of like, why does this happen? Because we are the common denominators of our lives, and if it's something that's coming up, we need to look within. And also, really, we are the only person that we can look within. So might as well. Of course, with any of these, I trace it down. And it really is an echo of my relationship with my dad, which historically has been an exemplary relationship. Like our, family, friends, relatives, it is one of those like stories told, like how good my father and I get on. And I've also held on to that narrative for a very, very long time. Like I have a really good relationship with my dad. I love and respect him and all that kind of stuff. And when I was doing this work of like, why is this happening? And why that as soon as I decide that I don't want to do that work anymore, the relationships start to disintegrate really fast. And the other person kind of like starts scampering around and doesn't really understand why things aren't like rosy and happy like they have been, right? And why they're like, I'm putting the same effort in as yesterday, but today for some reason it's not, we don't have this like amazing relationship. And I think that really boiled down to it was my relationship with my father is in that way, right? Like we do have a great relationship and I work really hard at that, and he appreciates it and enjoys it. I don't think he realizes that I do disproportionate amount of work in that relationship. It's like a very great example in that situation, which is, so where I come from, backgammon is a game. It's like a type of board game. If you don't know what it is, look it up. It's fun. But it's something that my dad is a man of few words. He's not into long drawn out conversations. But I figured out that if I learn to play backgammon, he plays backgammon and he plays it really well. He still beats me. That if I learn to play backgammon, he and I could spend time together that isn't necessarily anchored in conversation, which is what I would like, right? So going back to what you're, Jackie, if it was up to me, I would be like, we're having conversations, but more, I was like, let me meet you where you're at, which is you don't want to have like long conversations. Let me learn backgammon. It satisfies my curious brain anyway. And so that's how we connect now. Right? So that's kind of what it looks like for me.
Oh, that completely resonates. Yeah.
Again, this is a really good point to make that, and we're going to keep making that. Like, it's important. The distinction between a parental relationship and a lover relationship is different, and we need to make sure it's different. I think as we explore this, it's worth kind of like noting the echoes that are coming from parental side. Like for me, it's coming from like my examples to do with my dad is like, I am in your daughter's situation, and then you're telling your side of the story. You're in, my dad's situation. So we are discussing parental relationships alongside with our romantic relationships. I think it is good to note the parallels, right?
Exactly.
And
because that's the origin story too for somebody.
Right,
we'll
exactly,
get into that, right?
Exactly. And two, like ensuring that there is a separation and distinction, right?
Yes.
There's work to be done to make that distinction really, really obvious and visceral, so that we can also make room for the erotic and the sort of the adult relationship that we need from our adult relationships and partners and lovers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can give some adult relationship examples of what you have shared of extending myself. I can think about this particularly, let's say, in my teens and 20s. And I think this is a phenomena, at least here in the States, potentially for folks socialized as women, of watching my boyfriend play video games. Sitting on the couch, not doing anything, watching them play video games. And even up until recently, I would say, my partner now plays video games, not as much, but there were times where when that was the thing we were doing. And by we, meaning they were doing that and I was watching. Or going to a party or hanging out with my partner's friends. And I did not enjoy it. I did not like them. I did not feel seen. I did not want to be there. Walking there, I felt like that pit in my stomach, but I would do that, right? Like I would extend my bridge into their world because that is the place where I thought we would connect. So yes, have totally been in that place. And I'm, even though you and I, number one, think differently and approach kind of the work that we do in relationship differently, I'm hearing a pattern that I want to name, which is it feels like in each of our scenarios, we started down what felt like the obvious path for us. Oh, this is the thing that we do. And then it sounds like for each of us at some point, there was like a glimmer of like moral superiority. Like, look at me doing this thing, like learning backgammon, and look at me just giving you breakfast in bed, right? Then that turns into obligation. Like, oh, now this is the dynamic I set up. I need to keep doing this, which then turns into overwhelm. I don't want to do this anymore. This feels like a lot, which then turns into resentment. Why the hell do I have to be the one to do this? You're not doing this, right? And so we go from like obvious to moral superiority to obligation to overwhelm to resentment and just are like find ourselves in this terrible circle, because even when we get to resentment, we get back to obvious path because we're like, I just want there to be calm and goodness between us. And if I have to be the one to extend the leaf, then we'll do that. And the obvious path is for me to do, and then we're back in it again.
Yes. I think you're spot on. And I don't think it's just us who, I think that is a pattern that a lot of people experience, right? I think in a way, the fact that we have such different ways of thinking about things and to an extent being in the world, it shows that the fact that we can find ourselves in the same pattern is like, oh, it might just be beyond the two of us. I think it is, I think it's probably a lot of people resonate. And by the way, if you're listening and you're hearing this pattern and you're like, oh my God, this is just an average month for me. Let us know, like drop a note on our Instagram. Write to us, let us know. Because I think that is a pattern for a lot of us. Yeah. And then when I look at myself, like personally, when I reflect on it personally, like what are the things, like why do I do the thing that I do? Like what is my constitution? What are the parts of my constitution that really contribute to this, right? For me to show up in this like apparently disproportionate effort towards connection, right? I think some of it is just people pleasing. I think it's a defense mechanism. I think it's, we all have it. It's like wanting the connection, it's, if I fancy somebody, I want to have a connection so I can build the connection. Or if somebody, if I love somebody, like, like parental love, like I obviously want my dad in my life. And so that connection is important to me. So I think some of it is like wanting the connection, that very specific connection. And then contributing to that is like some unchecked empath behavior, just knowing, having that empathic superpower that is about just being able to connect to the other person and knowing what they want and instinctively kind of using that information to hotwire the connection and to make it all feel nice for everyone. I think some of it is idealization. I think looking back, I did idealize my dad. And I think that idealization sometimes shows up in my partnerships. And then expectations, like I also have high standards. They're just different, they're different than the cleanest dishes in the world, But I do have, expectations. And I think those are just like anybody else who's in a relationship. I think those go unsaid. Or I'm aware of them. So I'm dragging us all towards that expectation. And because I imagine it, because I see it in my mind's eye, I can make it happen for everyone. And that is the thing that I work with clients all the time, which is I assume a common shared vision without actually confirming it. Like I, in my head, want the relationship to look this way. And I think that it's going to be great for everyone. But I haven't really checked in, like I didn't really check in with my partner and be like, hey, like my common shared vision for our relationship is that we're gonna travel the world and like have a much more of a fluid, whatever connection. And that our love language is, touch and kind of moving together. And they're like, I just thought that we're gonna like, plant a garden and, raise some chickens, right? Those are very different visions, right? So you do need to kind of have I think, that common shared vision is an important thing to discuss.
Yes. Which is all right. So we spent some time talking about if you're on the side of I do more. I want to spend a minute talking on the other side, right? So now, if you've been listening and you're the one who has been told in your relationship that you don't do enough, that your partner is doing more than you, let's talk to you for a moment. First, I want to say, I think if that is true. Right? So there may be times where actually that you're not putting in more effort, that that you are distracted, that that you're not engaged and interested. And so you are not truly putting in as much. You don't feel like doing the dishes. You don't feel like doing the thing. You don't feel romantically, whatever that is. If that's the case, then that's true. I can't argue now with your partner. That is true. You're doing less. However, there are probably times also where you actually don't feel like you are doing less. You feel like you are doing less because you don't have that shared expectation of what it is you are supposed to be doing. And so, for example, let's use the example of the clean house and the clean kitchen. If you're the person who values ease, relaxation, comfort, and connection more than the cleanliness of your house, when your partner keeps harping on you to say, you're not cleaning things, you're not doing it, you clearly don't care, you're not doing enough. It's not that you're not doing enough. You're doing plenty to create ease and connection within your environment, which is the thing that you actually value. So it's not a mismatch of action. It's a mismatch of values or mismatch of understanding.
I think that's, absolutely key. And this is where the relationship, going back to relationship math, right? It's not as simple as 50-50 equals 100, right? You're now getting into some algebra and, like, what are you putting your weights on, right?
Yes.
What is if the other person's doing that, they're 100% towards a certain goal, or certain way of being or a certain value. And for some reason, you don't value that at this, you don't value that at the 100% level, but it's like it's lower on your value system, then that 100% can register like 70%, 30%, no percent.
Yes.
Because it's not something that you value, right? So now you're looking at much more complicated math than that.
Yes. Which is, so in the beginning we said, that relationships with parents and children are designed to be disproportionate. But the question is, why do we choose adult relationships that feel disproportionate? And I would argue that I think that because if you look at my relationship history, in most of my adult relationships, I have partnered with somebody who does not put in the same, and I'm using air quotes, you can't see me unless you're on Patreon and you want to watch the video. But I am seeing myself as doing more work when truly I've realized now it is different work. I have partnered with folks who value ease and play and connection more than the doing of the things on the ticker list. And because I'm the one who's in the hustle of doing the thing and getting up early and making the thing happen and serving the breakfast, like I have been And when I compare my actions during the day to theirs, the math told me I was doing more.
Mm-hmm.
But I have something deep inside of me that has longed for ease and play, chose these people in order to say, Jackie, put down the dishes, put down the Slack, put down email, and come and just sit on the couch and be.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, my daughter and I were walking home from gymnastics class and it started to rain. And so, of course, my mind was like, all right, we need to hustle to get home. We need to like look for any, covering that we can like dash into and out of, in order to walk the rest of the 10 blocks home. While I'm in my mind trying to navigate the quickest path and the driest path to the house, my daughter is in the rain, tongue open, mouth open, trying to catch raindrops in her mouth. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is a beautiful illustration. And I'll share a partnership example as well. But that's a beautiful illustration of the difference of how we saw that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I could be frustrated with her and say, I am the only one who is trying to get us home in the middle of this rainstorm. You're out here playing and I'm trying to get us home. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But what I realized in that moment was we have 10 blocks to go. There's really nothing I can do to make sure I do not get wet.
Mm-hmm.
Might as well catch some raindrops on my tongue.
Mm-hmm.
And so I too opened my mouth and we counted the raindrops that we could catch on our way home. And so if my percentile, if my math was, how are we going to get home in the most efficient way? I won that game, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I valued the joy in our experience in getting home, if I valued play, if I valued connection, if I valued lightness, honestly, she won. She won that match. And so the connection between the two of us meant we both did our 100%. The math wasn't 50-50. It wasn't 70-30.
Right,
She did her 100% of being fun. I did my 100% of getting us home safely. And we did both, right?
Yeah.
We got home and we caught some raindrops.
Yes, exactly. I have a question. Do you, when you were her age, so around 10, would you have caught the raindrops or would you have tried to stay dry? Because some of it is just childlike behavior because she's a child, right?
Right.
And I know that, of course, like there's also beyond that. And I was just curious to whether for you, if it's like more like it runs deeper than that, or is it like fully conditioned? Yeah.
I think, so I'll give you some examples. With my ex-husband, he loved traveling. He loved New Orleans. He loved music. He loved food. And so I did so much more of those things and got those experiences in my life because he created that. With my partner now, I will be working and it'll be past, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and I'm still working. And she'll take my hand and like bring me into the living room and just start dancing. Or she'll be like, okay, now we're just going to watch this cartoon and like chill out for a little while. Like she'll bring ease and play into my life. And again, if my scorecard was, did all the things get done? I win every single time. If my scorecard is my life more enhanced? Is it more joyful? Am I thriving because of this partnership? That my math went out the window.
Yeah. I think in your situation, you've kind of arrived at a beautiful place also, like by making your math more complicated, meaning having more partners in the equation, you've actually kind of made the math work, over time. And I think for some people you're dealing with, if you're dealing with a couple, you have, in one hand, you can say, well, you're just like an equal divide. On the other hand, I think sometimes making your math a little bit more complicated can help you level it out a little better. So that's just worth saying. Yeah.
No, I agree. If you're new to the podcast, and so what Effy is naming is that I'm married and I also have a partnership. And so in my relationship with my wife, we are both high achievers. We are both folks that are focused on getting things done. And so that feeds that part of me. There are an innumerable amount of lists in my home. There's flip chart paper and whiteboards in almost every room, right? And as a result, we have 2 homes. We have, multiple businesses. We have we're the doing people. right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do need that balance. And so my relationship with my partner is very different than that, right? You know, we share a 2-bedroom apartment with like dogs coming in and out of the home. And we, you know, turn off everything at a certain time and like cook dinner together and just chill in the evenings. And I have designed a life for that balance. If I did not have that, if I was not inclined to be non-monogamous or didn't have these 2 partnerships, I would have to balance that out with friendships and other connections and find relationships that feed my doingness and find other relationships that feed my beingness.
Absolutely. And I think that is, again, this math gets both simpler and complicated depending on your situation. And sometimes complicated is not a bad thing. Like in Jackie's situation, actually that little bit of complication, let me not play this down. Actually, it is complication because relationships are complicated.
Yes, agreed.
Actually helps to sort of balance the equation out. I think sometimes it's also worth knowing that sometimes it can be difficult if you are in multiple relationships and people start comparing how much effort goes into each relationship. You know, that let's say in the straight math world, you're going, well, you do 70% of the work here, I do 30%, but I see you do 70% of the work on your other relationship. Where is that extra? Why don't I get that extra 20% over here where it's available for over that, right? So that also sometimes works in that kind of way. I see that also in the way that, like, my extra piece, right? So I see people say, oh, like, you're working extra hard for that other connection, but you haven't even noticed that I had a haircut, you know? And so, like, those are all part of this relationship math we're talking about. And I think when you are in, and also I should also mention that, you know, there are plenty of couple, like, apparently easy 2 people relationships that are incredibly disproportionate. You know, that some relationships, they would look at the 70-30, be like, oh my God, that would be a dream. Like, I do 90% of the stuff. So honoring all of the things out there, and then just thinking about that, like, thinking about that math and how it distributes for you and what's important to you and all that kind of stuff. It's worth sort of sitting with that math.
Yeah, and for both sides. Okay, so now let's everyone now be at the table, right? So all sides of giving and doing and being, right? Now we're speaking to everyone. I think I'd want to explore, and this is the exploration I've done for myself. Why is that? Why am I doing it that way? Right. I think there's a little octopus turtle in there, right? So a little bit of folks who, and if you don't know that reference, go listen to our octopus turtle episode. But essentially it's a little byproduct of our childhood experiences and our DNA, which plug for next week's podcast episode, because we are going to be doing an episode about actually how our actual DNA and evolution impacts how we show up in relationships. But some of us may, because of either nature or nurture or the combination of both, lean in and take on more, and others lean away and avoid. And so I think that is a piece of it. But I think what you named earlier is almost exactly right. This idea of expectations, if we don't have shared expectations, redefine expectations for yourself as something that is named and agreed upon. If it is not named and agreed upon, it is just a wish. It is not an expectation. And holding other people to the expectation of either ease or effort is not fair unless that is something that you both have agreed to.
And by the way, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, when we say agree to, it doesn't necessarily mean like I can have an expectation and name it, and we can agree that expectation is not going to be met. Right.
Yes,
I think the important thing is that it is communicated, and there's it's like there's a decision made on it. Right.
Yes.
So I can say I have an expectation that, you know, my partner is going to read my mind and know my ever-changing moods and thoughts and join me in conversation, you know, that skips from one topic to another while I'm, you know, halfway through decided to do a handstand against the wall, right? I can have that expectation while my partner that does happen.
I love it.
And my partner can be like, yeah, I see that's your expectation. I'm not going to be able to fulfill that expectation.
Yes, exactly right. So, you know, a story that I've heard my whole life from my siblings to my daughter to my partnerships is that I have high expectations. And higher than the other person. And so when I, again, try to live a life based on that expectation, I have taken on the responsibility of doing more, because I'm like, well, I want to live up here. If that means that I got to do more of the work, then fine. I'm going to do more of the work to get there. But that was not a collaboration. I'm trying to control the situation, right? And saying, this is the thing that we have to do. A collaboration is saying, how is it that we want to feel in this space? I noted last week in the episode about pegging that a theme that I keep hearing across all of our conversations, no matter the topic, is that we need to think about how we want to feel in any given situation and not just what we want to do. And if we want to feel connection and ease and we want to feel peace of mind and what, then right, that goes back to nonviolent communication and the needs and feelings list. And if I want to feel peace of mind, and peace of mind to me translates as a clean house, because it's hard for me to have peace of mind if there's dirty dishes and there's clothes all over the place, then that's the conversation I can have with my partner. Not, you never pick up anything or clean anything, and I am tired of it. Instead, the conversation is, peace of mind is really important for me. And one of the ways that I have peace of mind is not to feel claustrophobic in my home by mess. And so what can we do to create that peace of mind? Very different conversation. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think shared value system and a common shared goal are really important things to have in any relationship and in discussion that is on an ongoing basis, right? And I think the answer to the how you feel is often a way to get to like the value that is really important to me. And that goes back to, again, like the weighing of the maths, right? So if peace of mind, if for your value system, peace of mind is number one. And for me, a peace of mind is in my value system, like number 7. Right. So the effort that goes towards peace of mind is going to be registered as less on the other side. So like deciding on what is our value system, what is the priority of our value system, right? What are the things that are really important to us? So let's say someone like me, right? So for me, actually, peace of mind, interestingly, the opposite to you, is a room that I will feel peace of peace and in control of my life will look very different to yours, right? Mine is often like Post-its and like books left open on the coffee table, so I know like I need to read. At some point in my bouncing around my house, I want to put that book in sight, so I will read it, because for me, out of sight, out of mind, right? So there are things out left in places to give myself cues that those are the things that need to be handled, right? That's the 100 tabs that's open in my browser. They're not open because I like don't shut them. They're open because I need a physical cue to tell me, like, remember you're supposed to finish like signing up for this account. So understanding, having a deeper dive into that as well, right? Let's say peace of mind is really important to you and peace of mind is really important to me. Like, what does it look like, right? If yours is this like neat, organized office that you just like want to see nothing but you know where everything is, like that's going to give me anxiety, because I'm going to be constantly thinking, what am I forgetting? What am I not seeing? What is the thing that I was supposed to do, right? And then you're going to walk into my office and my office is going to look like chaos to you. But as soon as I go in, I'm going to like breathe a sigh of relief and be like, oh, okay, like everything that's like hovering in my mind is now visually in front of me. And whatever I touch, I'm going to solve some problem. It might not be in the order that it needs to be done, but at least I know that if I like pick up that book and be like, oh, I was supposed to read that chapter. It's right now here in my hand. I can read that chapter. I'm like, done, right? I go look at my browser. I click on a tab. I'm like, oh, that thing that I was supposed to finish. And in that moment, I have a chance of finishing it because I see it, right? So when I go into my office, I see opportunity. You go into my office, you see chaos, right? And the way that translates into a relationship, if you imagine, you need to once agree on the values, you need to say, what is it going to look like? Like, what does it take for you to have that feeling, that value met, So I think those are really important conversations.
I am so glad you gave that example. A, because I know more, I learned more about you. B, I 100% believe we should take pictures of our offices and put it on Instagram, because what you have described is right. Everything in my office is exactly in a particular spot. It's color coded. Like everything is a particular way. But it's interesting because what you have described around the open books and the open tabs is in my mind. So I don't need it to be in my space. And what you have is you have the because that's on your mind, it has to be physically out there. So I think that is a perfect illustration of what we're talking about, which is the way in which you navigate the world, you think, you feel, you believe, the way you want to be is in a particular way. And you're trying to design your life around that. Right. And I'm trying to design my life around the way I want to think and be. And us in combination then have a shared value system.
Exactly.
And also a shared understanding of what quality of life looks like. So I want to go even beyond values, right? So certainly value system, but there are things that we need to actually do in order to create the kind of life that we want to have. And those things require time and energy and thoughtfulness. And so I think after the conversation around values, there's a conversation, okay, well, what do we need to do? And how are we going to divide up the tasks based on our strengths and based on where it fits on our values list, and then agree to let the person do that work, right? You take care of the food because you're going to be so much more creative than I am in terms of meal. I'm going to cook for efficiency. I'm going to cook to use the least amount of pans. You're going to be like, I want to use paprika and cumin. And I saw this thing once in this recipe. And so we're going to eat much more interesting and food if you are in charge of it.
But we'll eat at like 9:30 p.m.
Right. But then that's fine because then I'll know I'm going to have a salad at 6:30 when I need to eat and just anticipate a wonderful, delightful, creative meal at 9. But how can we, by relationship by design, which is the work that you do, how can we design something that actually fits both of us? And I think that means two things. I think number one, it is creating that division of labor and then doing check-ins around that. Check in at the end of the month, check in at the end of the quarter. Like, how does this feel, the way that we're dividing this up? And the other is to be okay with how it's being done. Yes. My daughter is in charge of the dishes, for example. My wife does the laundry, and neither of them do it how I would want them to do it. Right. But if that's their thing, that's their job, I need to let them do it. I need to let go of control and let them do the thing.
Yes, I think, again, the order of operations, for once, I've got the order of operations down. I think the order of operations that I think that's really effective in these kind of situations is to get clear on the common shared goal and the value system, and then translate that into doing, which is what you're saying, right? Yes. Which is what is it going to take for us to do that, right?
Yes.
And then who's doing all of this? Who's doing what?
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
And I think once you kind of work through that, and then the important piece is, of course, right? And I would say the reason why we get to this 70-30 situation, or more or less, is that we all have our favorite strategies for doing these things. We all have these ideal ways. Like Jackie has an ideal way of doing the laundry, right? The letting go piece is letting go, and I think also being creative about what it can look like.
Yes,
right?
Agreed.
And I think, it's not going to look exactly the same. That's why we're going to continue to refer back to but is this a feeling that I wanted? Do I feel, is it about me being very stuck with how my favorite strategy of how it's done? Or can I dial into the why, right? Can I dial into the value it's actually fulfilling and the feeling that I wanted to have? Do I have those things versus, is my laundry folded into threes?
Yes, exactly right. And let me give some examples that are not for folks who are in nesting partnerships and don't have shared chores, right? That could mean a distinction around how you see connection. So I know in my adult partnerships that there has been conflict before when I was like, okay, tonight we are just going to settle down and we are going to connect. And for me, that meant no devices, staring into each other's eyes and learning each other's deepest secrets. And for my partner, it meant sitting next to each other, holding hands while we were watching TV. Right? That they were like, I am exhausted from the day. I want to, no matter what we do, I want to do in that space with you, but that's not what I mean. If we both walk into that saying we're going to connect tonight, and we're both agree that we're going to connect tonight, and our definitions around connection are very different, we're both going to be disappointed. Another example could be around romance. I may say to my partner, I want to know that you're thinking about me throughout the day. And for me, that could be, send me a line of poetry, every hour, send me, a photo of something. And they may just send me a heart emoji. Every few hours, and they feel like they're checking the box of the thing that I wanted. But no matter what the example it is there some shared understanding? And the other piece, I'm going to make it a little bit more complicated and just add this moment of, when you're thinking about your values, I'm going to challenge you, because I have had to go through this work of, why is that a value of yours? So a value of mine, for example, I named as, the food has to be a certain way, a protein and a starch and a honestly and transparently, between you, me, and the thousands of people listening, it doesn't have to do anything about the food chart or like my healthy body. It is about worthiness and trying to prove that I am that kind of mother and partner.
Right.
That my daughter's going to go to school with a packed lunch that includes all the things. That's actually not about, I mean, it is about her being healthy, but it is about an idea of motherhood, an idea of womanhood, an idea of partnership, an idea of that I am trying to live into.
Sure.
And is that actually worth the hustle? Is me trying to live it that worth the hustle?
Right. And I think that is, I think that actually is a value, right? I wouldn't say the food is the value. I think the value is like worthiness is an important value for you, that you are deemed
the one that I want to challenge, frankly. Right.
Sure. I mean, by all means, I think that just yes, absolutely.
Peeling back the layer. I hear what you're saying.
Because I think that also drives you in. Sure, making lunch for your daughter that's like, with clementines and whatever
Yes.
nuts and deliciousness you were telling me about this morning.
No nuts in public schools.
Oh, wow, okay. See, Mama knows this. I would get my kid kicked out of school because I'm like, no, it's a really good nutritious snack. Just throw it in there. Because I didn't put a Post-it somewhere that says no nuts in the lunchbox. So I think because the worthiness is the value, because I'm sure it also affects your other decisions down the line and other areas of your life, right?
Correct.
So like the food and the doing piece is not the value. It's like, what is it that is trying to fulfill? And then a good clue actually to know that it is a value for you is that when it also shows up and affects other decisions and behaviors in the other parts of your life.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So we named that part of the process is establishing what our shared values are, figuring out how does that manifest into actual activities and kind of dividing that up based on shared expectations. I think the other piece that I have learned over time is understanding what our role is in the thing. There have been many times where my partner believed they were being helpful, and I did not think that. Because I realized over time, there's a difference between being controlling, being a collaborator, being a cheerleader, and being a helper, right? Those all show up differently. So there are times where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. Like I got to do dinner and then I got to do shopping. And my partner would be like, oh, okay, how can I help? And that question actually can be really annoying. How can I help assumes that you don't actually know what's necessary to do in order for us to eat, right? Or I'm like, oh, Christmas is coming, the holidays, and I want to think about something that's fun for us and how we're going to connect and what we're going to do. And I want to make it romantic and sweet and New Year's and all that. And you're like, oh, okay, how can I help? How can I help means I'm in charge of figuring out the details and I'm going to delegate responsibilities to you.
Of your vision.
Of my vision. Right, exactly.
Of your vision.
Exactly.
That's really important.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so in that dynamic, that is a controller helper dynamic, right? And there'll be other times where it'll be a controller cheerleader dynamic where I'm like, I'm doing so many things. And they're like, go, Jackie, go. You can do it. I love it. You're so great. Really what the aim is, it should be a collaborator relationship. Let's talk about what we want the holidays to look like and feel like. And let's talk about how we're going to work together to make that happen versus I have a very clear vision for New Year's. I'm going to do the thing, be mad at you that you're not helping with the thing, be overwhelmed about the thing, and actually be so caught up in the manifestation and execution of the thing that I forget that we're supposed to just be connecting.
Right.
An easy tell if you're in that dynamic of controller helper, controller cheerleader, like essentially if you're not in the collaborator environment, an easy tell is if you're the controller and your ticker is really loud, or if you feel like you have extended your bridge too far, that feeling, and when you're getting that feeling, means something is there's not synergy. Right? Or if you are on the other side and you're like, how can I help? How can I help? If you're asking, how can I help? There's likely not synergy, right? And in both of those moments, you can say, oh, there's misalignment here. There's misalignment because you seem overwhelmed and I actually don't know why. Like, I don't know what you're working towards, or I am overwhelmed and I feel like I am doing more. In both of those cases, it's a moment to pause and say, hey, are we aligned right now? Like, let's revisit that.
Yeah, exactly. Again, we're going to keep going back to that, right? That if you can have those bigger conversations around what is it that we're trying to work towards, that common shared vision. I think a good way for people to work this out for themselves, right? Like, where are we in terms of our relationship, right? So I know that people listen to the show. I know that people have like discussion groups around the show. I think a good for people something good to think about is that if you're the person that you're saying, how can I help? the 99% of the time you're saying because you want to be helpful, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to do the right thing. The opposite end of that, actually, is somebody assuming they know that what needs to be done and going ahead without checking in either, right? So that's when you have like two different visions. I think in those moments, it's worth saying asking yourself before you're saying, can I help? Asking yourself, what are we working towards?
Yes.
And if you can't answer that question, then instead of saying, can I help? You can say, hey, can we just agree on what we're doing?
Yes.
And then
what
I
are we
can
working
contribute,
towards?
right?
Yes.
So I think, again, like trying to catch these things not in the thick of it, but as things come up and having cues and clues in place to be like, okay, if I'm asking what am I, can I help? Just before that, let me just think, or jump to doing something. Let me just think, what are we working towards? Am I clear? Am I getting a clear answer? You can even check with your partner and say, oh, okay, so are we working towards this like fancy, elaborate Christmas in our home? And are we inviting everybody over? And are we hosting like the parents and everybody else? It's like what is it that, okay, then you can actually, if you missed out on that vision, if you missed out,
and also, why are we doing that? What are we trying to feel?
Exactly, right? I think that just having those conversations littered in, and constantly aligning and adjusting to make sure that it, that you are designing the relationship by design idea, and that designing of a relationship is a dynamic process. I talk about it's conscious and dynamic, right?
Yes.
Those are really important factors. And I think having these conversations along the way and looking at the cues, like right now, what we're talking about is through these like some fun stories and stuff, is these are the things that happen every relationship, right?
Yeah.
I see it so often, if not chronically, at some certain points in the relationship. They can provide us a place to heal, the place to connect, place to grow, and continue to design the relationship. So it's worth asking those questions along the way. If you say, can I help? If you say, I'm overwhelmed, right?
Exactly. Yes.
If you're the person that's saying, I'm overwhelmed, my ticker is so loud right now, I can't think of anything. I'm just everything is out of control. Stop and think, like, are you doing the things that you agreed to with everybody else? Like, or are you just like taking off on your own? And the reason why you don't have any support or appreciation or, recognition or, help, all those things, is it because you just forgot to tell people what you're doing?
Yes.
Right? Or or not have those conversations, or just went ahead with something without really checking if it was aligned with everybody else in your life?
Yes.
Have those conversations. And then the other hand, if you're constantly saying, what can I help? Or you're being told like you're not doing enough, you're not pulling your weight and everything else, to say like, what are we working towards? And do I really want to subscribe to that? Right?
Yes.
Maybe I don't want to subscribe to, a pristine kitchen, right? So how is that going to work out? Right? Is it going to work out?
Right. Yes.
So these are all good ways to reflect on both yourself and the relationship.
Yeah, I love it.
So if you are thinking about relationship maths, it's not as simple as 50-50 or equal distribution. What you're looking for is not symmetry, but it is synergy.
Wishing everyone good synergy vibes.
Good synergy, good alignment, good calibration. Like that language really helps people, because that's all about collaboration and multiple things aligning and multiple things working together. Yeah. So think about it in those terms rather than what I do, what you do. Yes. But how can we get aligned? How can we collaborate? How can we calibrate to one another?
All right. I'll have to give up my moral superiority. I do more than you list in my mind. Fine. Yes. No, super helpful. Super helpful. And if you have listened to this, and even after all this information, you are still curious, if you want to geek out on more nerdy, sexy, historical, controversial topics, then you need to check out the blogs and articles from educators, authors, and Effy and myself with tips on how to open up your relationship and about sex and about personal growth, all of those things on our website. You want to explore ways of getting in touch with your body on our website. You want to hear how to recover from infidelity on our website. All of the things that you want to know. And if you don't see that there, then you can get in touch with us. You know how? On our website.
If in doubt, go to our website.
And if that's not enough, you're like, I need more, then you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at We Are Curious Foxes. And for behind the scenes footage, mini episodes, and over 50 videos from our educator-led workshops, then you can go onto Patreon, also at We Are Curious Foxes. We hope that you can support us and the work that we are doing on this podcast by subscribing on Apple Podcast or following on Spotify or Stitcher. You can send us a rating or a comment to let us know that you're listening. And if you want to tell us about what podcast moments have felt the most impactful or what topics you want us to explore, then you can share that with us by emailing us or sending us a voice memo at listening@wearecuriousfoxes.com, or you can record a question for the show by calling us at 201-870-0063.
This episode is produced and edited by Nina Pollock, whose collaboration provides us synergy, support, and strength. Our intro music is composed by Dev Saha. We are so grateful for their work, and we're grateful to you for listening. As always, stay curious, friends. Curious Fox Podcast is not and will never be the final word on any topic. We solely aim to encourage curiosity and provide a space for exploration through connection and story. We encourage you to listen with an open and curious mind, and we'll look forward to your feedback. Stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.